All right,
Again.
good to go. All right,
So,
so Jason and I are here today to discuss template creation within GitLab, and Jason's done a lot of work here, so he's going to walk me through some of the work he's done, and then what we recently did with Netlify.
yep. And just to mention, I was going to mention to you in any case that I recorded a video recently where I added I started adding a template for Django where I go into a little bit more detail of the thought process. But here we can do a high-level overview that should be a little quicker. That other recording ended up being about 40 minutes long. But yeah, I thought maybe it would be easier at least to start with the Go Micro template that I added because there's only one template in there. The one that I added for Netlify had 5 templates, so it's a little bit more complicated. But it's essentially the exact same thing. Let's start with the boilerplate that needs to come in, and then we'll come back to how I made the project itself. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. So there's a bit of boilerplate that needs to come in. There's 3 main files that need to be edited. There's this project_new.js file, which contains something that's loaded at runtime, as best I understand, and just shows the text and links to the icon. If I'm completely honest with you, I'm not 100% sure this is used. I think it might just be code that's out there that is not referenced anywhere. But I didn't really mess with it. This is the way the other ones are implemented, so I've duplicated that. There's a changelog file that comes in that just gets created as a normal part of any development here at GitLab. We have a script in the repo called bin/changelog that generates this for you. But it's just used for generating the changelog at runtime. It's a GitLab specific thing, not related to the templates at all.
Gotcha.
Then there's this project_template.rb and then a spec file that goes with it. And what this has is, this is where you create the new template. So it's the name of the template here, how you want it to be displayed, a localizable string that contains the description of what it is. That's what this little underscore here refers to. It makes it a localizable string in Ruby.
Great.
And then a link to the project. And then basically down here, there's a spec that just makes sure that the exact same thing is echoed back. It's not the most brilliant test in the world, but but that's what it does.
Sounds good.
There's another thing that you have to do as well. So once you add a localizable string, there's a rake task called getText:generate, which will go through a bunch of files and then update this gitlab.pot file, which is, I guess, kind of what all of the localization is based off of. So it just is, all it's doing is taking that string, but you have to run that script in order to do it. And then the big piece, I suppose, is the actual tar.gz file. So you might expect that the way that this works is actually that it just goes out to the repo and forks it or clones it or whatever, removes the fork relationship. But actually the template is vendored and included in the repo itself. So the way you do that is by exporting, which I'll show you in a minute.
Great.
There's this other issue, which is document how to vendor product templates. And there's a script in here that you have to run that strips out all of the issues and pipelines that have run, and basically all of the things that come in the bundle that somebody who wants a fresh project is not going to want in there. And for these if you just make something new and then vendor it, it's not such a big deal because they'll just have your commits and like your couple of commits and your couple of pipeline runs. But some of these have been worked on for a long time and they may have hundreds of issues and that are about actually improving the template. So people don't want that in their repo.
Yeah, so this will give you a blank, essentially a blank repo or a blank project with no issues, no MRs, no commits, no pipeline jobs run, right?
Exactly. And this is what you do after you export your project once it's in the state that you want it to be in. So maybe I've done this slightly backwards, but this is kind of the last step.
Right, makes sense.
Basically, everything that I just took you through is also documented here. So adding the boilerplate to these files, adding the exported project, running the rake task that I was mentioning, running the changelog. All that stuff is actually documented here. There is one other interesting piece. If you want to add a logo, by default, you get the GitLab logo, the little orange tanuki. If you want to add a new logo, you have to add it to the illustrations folder here in the GitLab SVGs project, which then has to get, you have to get your change merged into here, and then this project has to get forwarded back into the main GitLab CE project. So it's a bit of a journey, but any front-end developer can help with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. So that's kind of the internal process for how you get it working. It's all pretty doable, and especially once you've done one or two of them, it's not so bad. But figuring it out on your own, and it would be really hard for somebody to do who is outside of GitLab, for example. But the only other thing that you need to do is actually make a project template. And this is the part where the actual knowledge of whatever framework or whatever you're building comes into play, which is arguably the harder part. And so this is the one that I built for Go Micro. And I'll talk to you about the Netlify ones as well and how I did those.
Sure.
But this Go Micro is a Go language microservices framework. And for frameworks, what you want to do typically, a lot of them have a command like .NET has .NET new, and Go Micro has micro new, which generates kind of all of the boilerplate and structure that's needed for a project that uses that framework. So this is the output of that. It's very simple. It's got the main.go here, which you run to run your microservice. I added a README, which contains, everything you need to know about how to get it, how to get it working. It links back to the Go Micro documentation about where this came from, how you need to customize it. In most cases, hopefully the best is that you don't have to customize it, but the way that Go works, unfortunately, is that the URL of your project ends up being the path in your file system. So you have to customize it based on the project that you just created. And maybe there's a better, clever way to do that, but I didn't quite find it. And then the other most important thing that you have to do is if it doesn't already work with Auto DevOps, you have to create a GitLab CI YAML that gets builds and deploys working. Probably more likely to work on builds than deploys, because one thing with templates now is that we don't really have a guarantee that infrastructure is set up. I have an issue open that it improves templates by letting a template ask questions while it's being set up for the first time, and then you can act on those. And then also introduces the idea of a first-time job that runs only once when the template is created for the first time, that would let you have like a little bit more control on doing these things. For most languages, and like what I use for this one is I just used the Go GitLab CI YAML template, which took me 90% of the way there.
Right, okay. What were the changes you had to make to get to 100%?
In here, so the way that this framework works, I had to add a proto-C command, protocol buffers compiler, which is just part of the way that the framework works. And then I think I just changed like, one or two small things in here. .NET Core required a little bit more customization. It is, .NET Core is the multi-platform version of .NET, but it still required a little bit more. Obviously, there wasn't a template for .NET Core builds, but it wasn't too bad. And if you know the framework that you're implementing, then it should be pretty easy. The pages ones were actually pretty interesting. So if we go to like, what I started with for Netlify, did I call it Netflix earlier? I think I might have. Netlify was, we have all of these projects like a Hexo template, a Jekyll template that's designed to work with GitLab pages. They have a GitLab CI YAML in them because GitLab pages uses GitLab CI.
Yeah.
And so what I did with these, in order to make them work with Netlify, is I removed that GitLab CI YAML because it's going to use theirs instead. And then often I think for almost all of these, I had to make one or two little changes to the config.yaml to make it match exactly what Netlify expects in terms of where you place everything, just so that users who want to use this don't have to then kind of repeat that step every time. And yeah, I added this README, which added how to get it working on Netlify. And my goal here, which I think I achieved in all of them except for one, was just point Netlify to your new URL and it will just work.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So this wasn't too bad. This was easier, even easier than some of the framework ones. But once you've done this and you've got this thing in your working state, what you do is you go into settings, export project, click on export here, and it will mail you a link, or you can refresh the page after a moment. And that's the file that feeds into the, that's an input to this script, which then outputs a different tar.gz file.
Yep, and then that's the one you would reference for the project template.
Exactly, and it's removed all of the LFS files. It's removed all of the extra junk and everything. There is a plan to document this actually on the website. I think this is actually the issue that will result in that being documented. And then a plan even beyond that, which I think is really important to actually just automate this. And every time we do a release, it should just go fetch the projects that are GitLab vendored projects, build them, package them up, put them in the thing. We don't have to check them into source control anymore, which is kind of a funny process in the first place.
Sure.
There's a question there about how we want to handle community contributed templates, because just going and grabbing source code that somebody else wrote and then packaging it and putting it inside of GitLab without any oversight is probably something that we want to think a little bit harder about. But at least for the GitLab developed ones, it would just be so much nicer to just add that boilerplate and then know that the build process will pick it up.
Right. And so if you go to the live application on GitLab.com, what are the active templates again? I believe it's like Spring, Go, Rails,
yeah,
and then
we're in the middle of a bunch of them being released now. But yeah, let's see what's out on production at the moment. Okay, so Ruby, Spring, and Node.js Express, and then the GitLab Pages templates are out here. Hopefully all of these will be in for 11.9. We'll also have all 5 of these static site generators also pre-configured to work with Netlify. We'll have Go Micro, we'll have .NET Core, and then all of those ones are done and will be there for sure. We're working on Android and iOS. Android is done, iOS is being wrapped up, and I hope that all of those will be in here by the time of the next release.
You know, it would be interesting to create a framework where the community could bundle up their own project templates, and they're not necessarily bundled into the application. So we have little risk, but there could be a tab here that says, you know, community project templates, and this is how a lot of other service providers do these types of templates, right? There's a officially supported templates, and then there's the long list of community provided templates. So that would be an interesting thought.
It would be for sure. You can already sort of accomplish that by using, like, if somebody was to make a repo that they say, clone this and it's my template, but the discovery of that is very poor right now. You would just sort of have to know that it exists. And whereas this is really nice and discoverable.
Yep. Okay, great. So the process of creating a project template, not as scary as we all thought it was.
It was only scary and difficult when it was not documented. And I had to go find all of these files and keep running builds until it passed.
So that's an interesting point. You have kind of navigated through a few different pages here, but is this on our official documentation yet?
No, that's what this issue is. And I think that, So Jeremy, who's the product manager for Manage, which owns that area, asked me if this documentation was sufficient just to post to the website. And my comment was just, and this is from today, so it's just a fresh comment, is we probably just need to test it and make sure it's really ready, like reviewed by a technical writer or something, because this is just the notes that I was typing up as I went, and I could have missed something, and it just needs to be double checked to make sure it makes sense to anybody except for me.
Would you mind clicking on that contributing link that was down below in the second to last comment? I was in that yesterday, and it was
so
there's a bunch of changes to it that happened in the 24 hours. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is just my notes copied and pasted.
Okay, yeah. This
which is good. It's better than what was here before, but it's not complete.
Sure. Yeah, we definitely would want to streamline.
Like it has what I pasted for my very specific command here, which is adding a project template for .NET. It sort of gives you the sense of what you need to do, but you definitely should not copy and paste this command, and it would be confusing.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, thanks so much for that, Jason, for walking through that and for creating those templates in your, very copious amounts of spare time, I'm sure that you have. And this has been really helpful. I'm going to stop recording now so that we can get this over to the Unfiltered channel.
I'll just say one more thing, that if you or anybody who's watching this wants to create a template and runs into any trouble, just give me a ping if you get stuck, and I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jason.